Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking into the secret society known as the Freemasons, what their connection is to what I affectionately call the club, as well as the 13 bloodline families. And if you yourself have been feeling like something is just not right in the world today, this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Faye, and I am a psychic, an intuitive, and an energy reader, and this is Solar Flow, a channel that is dedicated to peeling back the three-dimensional veil and exploring the soul, spiritual, and energetic elements that are comprising the world that we see around us. So if you like exploring the psychology and the soul contracts between celebrities, celebrity relationships, and true crime, this channel is definitely for you, and I invite you to subscribe. Now, before we get into the psychic energy read on the Freemasons, I'm going to begin by sharing some 3D information according to the Masons from their own website. So this is information directly from the horse's mouth, one could say. Freemasonry, according to the Masons themselves, is a fraternal organization with roots in medieval stonemasons guilds, emphasizing self-improvement, moral lessons, and fellowship with members believing in a supreme being. However, the website does not specify what that supreme being is, and I'm going to request that you keep this in mind because it is going to directly correlate with the psychic energy read coming up. Now, according to Google, there are 51 Masonic lodges in the United States alone, with an estimated 850,000 members in the United States. And while I could not get an exact number of Masonic lodges worldwide, the best estimation of worldwide membership is anywhere between 2 and 6 million people. Now, interestingly enough, Masons have a lot of symbolism, some of which you yourself may be familiar with. But according to them, they are drawn from the tools of stonemasons, the squares and compasses, but also more nebulous things like black and white checkered floors, which they claim is a physical representation of good and evil, which I found to be particularly notable because if this is an organization that has a strong emphasis on self-improvement, moral lessons, fellowship, and a belief in a higher being, I found it to be rather interesting that the Masonic lodges themselves are known to have black and white floors, again, which according to them is a physical representation of good and evil. So that concludes the 3D information share into the Masons. And before we get into the psychic energy reading portion, I just want to take a moment and say that a lot of the concepts that I'm going to be sharing here are going to be connected to the video that I had done on the club. So I have linked that video down below if you have not yet seen it. I recommend either pausing this video and going to watch that one, or as soon as you conclude this video, going back and watching the video that I had done on the club, because a lot of the information shared herein is a direct connection to it. And in fact, I would say that this video could be considered a companion video to the one that was done on the club. So now let's begin the psychic energy read into the Freemasons. Now, as soon as I had connected to the energy of the Freemasons as a whole, it was shown to me that it is a faction or a sister branch of the club, as in they have the same shared goals. However, the Freemasons have been around for far longer. Now, as I had discussed in the video that I had done on the club has been around for just over 100 years, while the Freemasons have been around since the 1700s. And whereas the club originated in the United States, the Freemasons originated in Europe. So essentially, this is the old world versus the new world, but they are still connected. Now, the Masons, in part to them being around far longer than the club has been around, has a higher elevated status than the club members do. So the Masons are more exclusive than club members are. So in terms of hierarchy, it goes from bottom to the top: the club, Freemasons, the Cabal, the 13 bloodline families, and then Satan. Because yes, that's the higher being that the Freemasons believe in. Now, I have an illustration of the way that the organization as a whole pans out. As soon as I share the image, you might want to actually pause the video so you can get a clear look at it. The way that it is formatted is a pyramid. And if you've been here for a while, that is going to come as absolutely no surprise to you, because a lot of the symbolism of members is actually flashing a pyramid symbol with their hands. So here we go. At the very bottom, we have the club. Right above the club are the Freemasons. Above the Freemasons are the Cabal members. Above them is the 13 bloodline families. And at the very top of the pyramid is Satan. Now, how do we know that Satan is at the very top of the organization as a whole? And how do we know that the higher being that the Masons worship is Satan? You don't actually have to take my word for it, because the tell is in our currency here in the United States. Because the top of the pyramid on money is the so-called seeing eye, and that represents Satan. Now, I don't just have an illustration to share with you, I actually also have United States currency to show you. Because again, Don't take my word for it. The tells are all around us, and once we learn how to decode them, you will never not see them again, including the tell that is on American money. Here I have a $1 bill. And on the very back of the $1 bill is a pyramid. And if you look at the very top of the pyramid, there's an eye. That is the all-seeing eye of Satan. And why, you may be wondering, is Satan's eye on all American currency? Well, it's because Satan is keeping a watchful eye on money, which is his domain. And if this is the first you are hearing about this, I have a video which I have linked down below on religion and the Cabal, in which I do a deep dive into this. But to give you just a little bit of context, when the Cabal first came to be, it was when the Jews were liberated as slaves from Egypt. Now, after Moses had gone to the mountaintop to commune with God for 40 days, there was some confusion when the 40 days began. And thus, when Moses did not come back at the conclusion of the 40 days, because there was, again, some confusion, when did those 40 days actually begin? Some people had freaked out and they needed a more permanent and visual representation of a God that they could see instead of a nebulous one on a mountaintop that they could not either see nor commune with. And thus the golden calf was created. And the golden calf was meant to be a physical representation of God. And what was the golden calf made of? Well, obviously gold, but also jewels, which in time came to be a currency, as in our money. Now, this too is going to explain why those that are seeking to achieve any level of success, either in Hollywood or the music industry, as in they are seeking to achieve a level of financial success, are told that they must first, basic bitch entry level, worship Satan. As in, if you want to have financial success in the 3D world, Satan is the god whose purview that falls under.
I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music, yeah. But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil.
You're still out here doing these songs, you know, you're still on tour.
I do, but I don't take it for granted.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I mean, I made a bargain with it, you know, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my hand.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with you know, with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And on this earth, and then in the world we can't see.
Thank you to Satan for giving me inspiration on how to play this role.
Satanism is working really I made a pact. The movie came out so well. That was Satanism. It's working really I made a pact.
So just as those that join the club worship Satan, so too do the Freemasons. And because they have an elevated status and they are not just useful idiots, that may also include so-called special missions for the Masons to go on. And those special missions are what we ourselves might refer to as false flags. And what is a false flag? Well, it is any event that is known about across a country or even globally known about that from the outside to those that do not know what it is may appear to be some sort of a tragedy, such as a pow-pow event at a school, like the one that we had seen in Columbine and more recently Uvalde, Texas. But to those that are in the know, it is actually a scripted or orchestrated event. Now, one thing to keep in mind is even though the title includes the word false, as in false flag, it does not in fact mean that the event did not really occur. Because when these pow-pow events happen, they are really happening. That is not what is false about it. The falsity of the false flag itself is the so-called approved narrative of the event. Because again, to those that know and that are on the inside, these are orchestrated and scripted events. So whatever from the outside looking in is being said about them is at best half the story, and at worst, it is actually in fact a complete fabrication of the truth of what occurred. Again, it's not an indication that what is said to have happened didn't happen. It happened. It's just that whatever is said to be the truth of the reality of it, that's what's in fact false. Now, you may then be wondering if these events are really occurring and it's only the approved narrative that is not the truth of the matter, what purpose is there for a false flag at all? Well, false flags serve multiple purposes, such as auspicious unaliving of the club members' little ones, which we will discuss a little bit later on in the video, as well as causing fear, which is the lowest and densest human emotion, as well as causing chaos and unrest in the country or the world as a whole. And guess what chaos is? Well, it's the calling card of Satan. And since chaos is the calling card of Satan, hence Satan's henchmen, the Freemasons, are the ones to carry it out for Satan. Because I'm going to remind you, while Satan is in fact real, he is tied to one location on the earthly domain and he cannot leave that location. So people are either going to go see him or they're going to summon his energy into the world through blood, sex, magic rituals. But he, while having a physical form, is tied to one location. Therefore, he cannot carry out his own machinations, and he relies first and foremost on the 13 bloodline families, which is his progeny, to then disseminate the actions and activities that he wants done on his behalf. Let's go back to the drawing. It goes from the top all the way down. At the very top, we have Satan. Satan is, if you will, the general of the army. Below Satan is the 13 bloodline families, which would be the equivalent of different generals. Below the generals are the lieutenants, and that would be considered the cabal. Below the lieutenants, well, that would be considered a division head. That's the Freemasons. And the privates, as in the scullery maids, if you will, that carry out the actual dreg work, that's the club. Well, then you may be wondering, do all of the Masons have special missions that they carry out, i.e. the false flags? No. And it is only the Masons of the very highest degree that are eligible to even do them. But even then, just because one is eligible does not mean that they will in fact ever be chosen to carry out one of these special missions. And no, 33rd degree Masons are not in fact the highest level Mason that one can be. Just as the club has so-called useful idiots, so too many of, in fact, the 33rd degree Masons are nothing more than useful idiots, because they serve as some sort of a front to the nefarious activities that really can and in fact do occur. These Masons that are used as a front and are really in fact nothing more than the useful idiots do not know what actually goes on. But because they think that they have achieved the highest degree, they are used to show that the Masons are no more than a brotherhood and fraternal organization of some kind. And these 33rd degree Mason useful idiots, the ones that are so damn proud to be a Mason, the ones that you're going to see on the internet arguing that they themselves are a 33rd degree Mason, and no, the Masons do not in fact do any harm, you crazy conspiracy theorist. But these Masons, they don't know what they don't know. And they are in fact doing exactly what they have been intended for. They are a front or a cover for the actual highest degree Masons that do actually carry out the very things that they are denying happens. And you may then be wondering if the 33rd degree Masons are not in fact Masons of the highest degree. What is? Well, the actual highest degree Masons are 66 degrees. And why is 66 the highest level that a Mason can achieve? Well, since they are the servants of Satan, and thus below as a servant they are beneath Satan, they are 1 degree short of the number that is associated with Satan, 666. So a 66 degree Mason is actually the highest level that a Mason can achieve, because again, it's only 6, and as a servant of Satan, they're 1 number removed. So if you yourself are familiar with some of the hand gestures that are flashed by people in the club, it's actually a nod to Satan. Some hand gestures that you yourself may have seen or be familiar with those in the club flashing is this. But if they're a Mason of a higher degree, then they may actually indicate, as in their higher up elevated status in the club, they may actually indicate not just 333, but 666. And some of the ways you may have seen people doing this. And no, I'm not in the club. Thank you, universe, for the emphasis on the fact that I am not in the club. There are ample examples on the internet where you yourself can find celebrities that are doing this, or that are doing this. Now, they are not necessarily Mason, so the hand gestures are not actually for us to understand, which is why when we see them doing this, it might not make sense to us. It's not for us. They are flashing and indicating to other members in the club what level they are at. Lower level, higher level. And again, the symbolism is not for us necessarily to understand. They are giving an indication to other members in the club, I'm one of you, I worship Satan too. Now, interestingly enough, it was also shown to me that the so-called highest degree, as in the 33rd degree Masons, are not respected by those above them or those that are in fact in the know. Because even the 33rd degree Masons, which in their understanding, and certainly our understanding if we're not part of the Masonry, would be considered the highest level that one could achieve, they're in fact nothing more than useful idiots. Because the highest degree Mason, the ones that are carrying out the special missions, i.e. the false flags, those are the 66th degree Masons. And again, 66 because they are the servants of Satan, thus they are below Satan and are only 66 and will never achieve full satanic status of 666. So because to the 66th degree Masons, they look at the 33rd degree Masons as nothing more than useful idiots, there is even among those in a secret society an even more exclusive and secret faction that operates within it and certainly above it. Because the 33rd degree Masons that are nothing more than the front, they don't even know that the highest level they can achieve is the 66th degree. And just as a 2% personal opinion aside, take that Blake Lively, who thinks that she is hot shit because she's in the club. Bitch, please. She is literally the lowest of the lowest of the lowest that she herself can be. She's at the bottom level because she's only in the club. But back to the Freemasons. So those that are at the top of the Masons, as in those that could be the 66 degree Masons, these may be people that are police chiefs, mayors, governors, the head of government agencies, such as the CIA and the FBI here in the United States, the MI6 in England, the Mossad in Israel. They could be generals in armies. They could be heads of countries, prime ministers, and even presidents. And in fact, to date, I believe 15 former American presidents, including our very first one, George Washington, they were Freemasons. So essentially, these are the people that keep the world in so-called running order, which is no coincidence because what do the Freemasons spring from? Medieval stonemasons. So they are the literal 3D builders using 3D building blocks to build the world. But then you may be wondering, if these are the people that keep the so-called world running, why does it appear as if the world is not in fact running very well? That's no coincidence either. And perhaps this too can explain why some factions of the government appear not in fact to be working very well at all. This is by design. It is not ineptitude, but the intentional furtherance of chaos. And chaos again is the calling card of Satan, the Mason's master. Now, I have just two examples of what may at face value have appeared to have been government oversight or ineptitude, but again was in fact an orchestrated event of the furtherance of chaos. Now, these examples are in my own country, but I'm sure you have ample evidence of events that have occurred in your country, and please feel free to comment down below on what those may have been for you. But here in the United States, we recently had the California wildfires that for some reason could not be put out because the reservoir from which the water was taken to put fires out was empty, and also because the fire hydrants were also empty. Ineptitude, it was not. Chaos, it was. And we also have, from a few years ago, Hurricane Katrina. So these are two examples of so-called natural events, but the fallout was so apparently terribly mismanaged that it made the actual natural occurrences worse, which again was completely by design because it furthered chaos. But there are also events that do not include natural disasters, but where something just doesn't seem to add up. And those are the false flags. Such as the Uvalde Pow Pow event, the Columbine Pow Pow event, and countless other Pow Pow events that occur around the country. Now let's stop and break down Uvalde for just one moment. This is an event where the police broke all protocol and they did not actually go into the school to stop the Pow Power, but instead stood outside to actively stop parents from going in to rescue their littles, because the police were not in fact there to stop the event from happening, but were working to secure a successful outcome. But it's not just Pow Pow events at schools that appear to be terribly mismanaged, because this can also include police investigations that are so badly botched, it all but assures that no suspect can ever successfully be apprehended. Like we saw with the JonBenet Ramsey investigation. Now, I have a previous video of mine on JonBenet Ramsey, which is also linked down below. Highly recommend going back and watching it if you have not yet seen it. However, I will just briefly point out that the complete apparent police ineptitude in Colorado was not in fact because the police were inept, but was specifically instead done to protect the other Masons, the other brothers that were there to observe the most auspicious event of one Masonic member pledging their own for a higher status as a Mason. Because just like the false flags, like the Pow Pow events, which can be big, sacrificial, multi-family members pledging their littles in exchange for a higher degree, Masonry, individual families can do the same as well, which was very much the case of what was done with Jean-Benet Ramsey as well as little Madeleine McCann. And I know, it sounds crazy to say that families will sacrifice their own in exchange for a higher level degree in the Masonry, but they do. And they are not doing it for money, because money is not as important to them, and neither are their own kids, because nothing is as important to them as ascending the ranks and the respect of their brothers, which when a Mason decides to in fact sacrifice their own is an enormous amount of respect that it garners for them, which is also why there were so many Masons that were present in the unaliving of Jean-Benet Ramsey. Because if you're a Mason and you want to achieve a higher degree, there is nothing more auspicious than sacrificing your own little. And when it's done on a small individual basis, those are the Jean-Benet Ramseys and the Madeleine McCanns of the world. When it's a big event where it's multi-families that are coming together to pledge their littles at one time, those are the false flag, pow-pow events in schools. But again, I'm going to remind you, these events really do occur. There really is the unaliving of the littles. And sometimes those littles that are the victims, those are the ones that were pledged by their parents. So that way the family could achieve more respect and a higher degree in the Masonry. But it is not always the littles, because sometimes, in fact, what the parents will do is they will sacrifice their children to be the ones that are the pow-powers. This is what had happened in Columbine. Those two boys that were the pow-powers in Columbine, their parents were Masons. And the sacrifice was that their children had MK Ultra mind control that was done on them to program them to commit the pow-pow event in their school. So sometimes the sacrifice can be the littles, like it was in Uvalde, but sometimes the sacrifice is the children that are the ones that are committing the offense and committing the crime. And you then may be wondering, well, how do you know the difference? Look at Uvalde. The police were actively not allowing parents to go in and rescue their children. But in Columbine, the children ran free to cause more chaos. Because the purpose of Columbine wasn't the unaliving of the littles because they weren't pledged by their parents. It was for those that had the pow-pows to just unalive as many as they could for the purpose of the furtherance of chaos, which also causes fear, the heaviest, densest human emotion. But again, they have to tell us. They have to satisfy their laws of karmic retribution, which is why you would see the police engaging in out-of-protocol behavior. Again, it's not police ineptitude. They have to tell us, and they're banking on us being so asleep that when we see it, we don't even know or register what it is that we're seeing. But when the police engage in an activity that is against protocol, it's because they're there to guarantee some sort of an outcome. And if the police aren't there, like they weren't with Columbine, Well, it's because the littles that were being unalived were not pledged by their parents. The pow-powers with the pow-pow instrument were there just to further chaos. But here's the thing. Actually, sacrificing the life of your little is not for everyone, but is rather only for the most committed and loyal Masons. So for those that don't in fact want to sacrifice the life of their little, there is a sacrifice diet or sacrifice light version, which is where a family will have a trans child. Because yes, believe it or not, this too is seen as a sacrifice to Satan. Now, this is not to say if I have any viewers that are watching and you have a trans child, you're sacrificing your child to Satan. No, it also doesn't mean if you know somebody that has a trans child, they're sacrificing their child to Satan either. No, it's to say that when you see a celebrity with a trans child, they're the ones that are sacrificing their child to Satan. And you may be wondering, why does Satan care? Or why does Satan want the celebrities to sacrifice their children to him by way of making them trans? Which is a very fair question. So this is where I'm going to remind you that Satan is a fallen angel. And because of his fallen angel status, Satan was banished to the earthly domain. And the 13 bloodline families are his progeny, which is why in the pyramid, the 13 bloodline families are right below Satan. And being Satan's progeny, the 13 bloodline families, along with Satan, absolutely hate what God had done to Satan. So from their point of view, what better way to make a mockery of God than to pervert the sexual identity of God's children, which in fact also stops them from procreating. So it's like, if you got cockroaches in your kitchen, do you want more cockroaches? No, you want to kill them so there's no more cockroaches. That's kind of the way they see us. We're nothing more than disgusting cockroaches to them. So they want to make trans trendy. So the purpose of the celebrities having trans kids is to make trans an agenda and to make it trendy, to prey on the most insecure and vulnerable of the population, which are the teenagers. Because if you get them when they're vulnerable and they're confused as a whole, and then you tell them that they're confused because they were born into the wrong body, but we've got a solution, it's the furtherance of chaos, calling card of Satan, and oh yeah, hey, it also happens to get them to stop procreating. But also, God makes no mistakes. But if you tell people they were born into the wrong body, well, that's an indication God certainly made a mistake with them, didn't he? So it's a rather convenient way of also getting us to be disconnected from our own inherent connection to the divine. And here's something wild. Royals have covertly been inverting the genders of their children to honor Satan for literal hundreds of years. I kid you not. It goes back as early as the 1700s. And because, yes, in case you do not yet realize, the monarchs are in fact below the bloodline families. And because the monarchs are below the 13 bloodline families, having them covertly invert the genders of their children is a good way to keep those below them down, as in keeping the monarchs from growing too big for their britches. And in modern day times, this is a damn good way to test the allegiance of the loyalty of a club member. As in, are you willing to metaphorically sacrifice your child if you don't have the stomach to physically sacrifice your child? Which is another way of asking, how badly do you want this? How badly do you want to be a member of the club that you're willing to metaphorically sacrifice your child? And where have we perhaps seen this playing out with sports stars or celebrities? Well, for Mr. Williams, was he willing to parade his two boys around as Venus and Serena Williams? And for Academy Award winning actress Charlize Theron, did she want it bad enough that she was willing to parade her two adopted sons around as girls? Both of them. And isn't that just the most remarkable coincidence? Two adopted sons, and both of them identify as trans. I'm sure it's just a big coincidence. But it's not just Venus and Serena Williams or Charlize Theron's adopted sons. There are so many other examples of trans kids in Hollywood. And for something that supposedly affects 0.02% of the general population as a whole, trans seems to disproportionately affect those in Hollywood, which is, again, I remind you, by design. Because if we worship the false idols, well, then we'll want to be just like them. But it's not just parents that are either literally or metaphorically sacrificing their own littles. Because people can sacrifice themselves as well. But this is not literally where they're taking their own life in exchange for a higher degree in the Masons, but this would be sacrificing their life as they know it, as in sacrificing their freedom just as Brian Koberger did. And in the case of Brian Koberger, as I had pointed out in the video that I had done on him, which is also linked down below, he could have voluntarily decided to commit the crimes, and or he also could have decided that he was going to go down for it, as in being the one that the police pinned the crime to. Which, again, I know sounds crazy, because who would willingly give up their freedom in exchange for some higher degree status in a secret organization? But this is where I remind you that it's for the respect of the other Masons. And if they're not literally sacrificing their own life or their own freedom for themselves to have a higher degree, well, then it's where a parent can actually sacrifice the freedom of their child, where their child has a crime that is pinned onto them, so that way the family can achieve higher status. And this is the case of what happened with Karen Reed, where her father had sacrificed her, and having the unaliving of John O'Keefe to potentially be pinned onto her in exchange for the family having a higher status in the Masons. Well, Karen Reed was supposed to have, in fact, been found guilty. But I'm going to remind you that free will reigns supreme. And what the Masons did not bargain on was the case of Karen Reed getting so much nationwide attention that there were internet sleuths that were looking into the case and pointing out all of the various different inaccuracies in the evidence that did not actually support her being found guilty. But there's a reason that she was tried 2 times, because they were trying to get the desired outcome, as in Karen Reed found guilty. The first trial ended in a hung jury, and the second one ended in an acquittal. And if you watch the footage of her in the courthouse after hearing that she was found not guilty, perhaps you too found her reaction to be a bit puzzling, as in she did not appear to be happy, not at all, and not even a little bit. Because she knew she was a pledge for her family, and now that she was found not guilty, the thoughts that were banging around in her mind was, what happens to my family's elevated status? Because I again remind you, the sacrificing of one's own child, either for a crime that they did not commit, or a crime that they volunteered to commit, or literally sacrificing their life, or sacrificing their gender, is considered to be a most auspicious event, and one that garners the most amount of respect by the fellow brothers in arms. And sacrificing your own is in fact considered to be the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate honor, because it is in fact the ultimate sacrifice. And much more so than either publicly or privately just transitioning your child or pledging your child to go down for a crime that they did not commit. And because it is the ultimate sacrifice, it is also considered to be the ultimate honor, and the one that affords the family the most honor and respect bestowed upon them, at least by the other Masons and by the other Masons that are in the know, as in not the ones that are the so-called useful idiots. But here's what those that do actually sacrifice the life of their own little do not realize. They too are in fact nothing more than a useful idiot to Satan. And this is because by virtue of the fact that they are willing to sacrifice the life of their own child for honor, no less, they too have succumbed to chaos. Because at its core, sacrificing your own child for some three-dimensional honor and respect is in fact nothing more than chaos. It's just chaos that has cleverly been cloaked in honor, esteem, respect, and prestige. So while it can be dressed up in any way with nice platitudes, a piece of turd is still a piece of turd, even if it's called by another name. As in, it's still chaos, even if it's called honor and respect. And that's what the Masons of the highest degree, as in the 66th degree, don't realize. Well, they think that they are special, and they think that they are above the so-called regular Freemasons, and that they are above the lowly club members, And while they are removed from the dregs of regular society, but in reality, they are so low in both the eyes of the Cabal, the 13 bloodline families, and especially Satan, who is essentially using them and their sacrificing of their own littles to cure his interminable boredom of being chained to one location for thousands of years. But that's what they don't know. So look how these members of the Freemasons are willing to, in fact, lower themselves to belong to a club or a brotherhood. Because in fact, the higher their rank, the higher degree Mason they in fact are, the more they are owned and the less that they are in fact free. And because they are more owned and they are less free, they are in fact the most brainwashed of them all. As in, they are more brainwashed than the general population as a whole, and are in fact more brainwashed than even the sleepers. Because imagine how much Masonic Kool-Aid one must have drank to believe that sacrificing their own child gives them some sort of honor or prestige. And also imagine how low vibe one must be to make the choice to literally sacrifice the life of their own child or the freedom of their own child, or to subject their children to MK Ultra mind control, to have them commit crimes on the population at large for elevated status and respect. But also then imagine how brainwashed the other members of the Freemasons are to see their fellow brothers in arms either choosing to sacrifice their own life and their own freedom, or for their brothers in arms to sacrifice the life of their own child for honor and respect, and then patting that parent on the back for it and congratulating them for it once it's done. Imagine how brainwashed they must be to want to be present at the committing of a crime because it is considered to be so auspicious. So while the Masons mock us for our stupidity, for not seeing the false flags for what they in fact are they in fact any better than us? Are they in fact even free? Or are they nothing more than a dressed up slave of a secret society? That concludes the psychic energy read into the Freemasons. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this, perhaps found it to be thought-provoking or insightful. I remind you to take what resonates and to leave the rest behind, and this is your reminder until next time to stay in that high vibration.